Hopefully you're here to see a presentation about the value of having a Salesforce, dedicated Salesforce integration user. My name's Greg Poirier. I am a president of Cloud Kettle. We're a Salesforce Silver partner. We're a consulting company that specializes in working with B2B SaaS companies and deploying their instances of Salesforce and their instances of marketing automation platforms. And we do a lot with the Google integrations to Salesforce. So I've got about a decade Salesforce experience, and also I'm actually Salesforce alumni. I was part of the Radian 6 team that was acquired by Salesforce about a decade ago. So what we're going to talk about today is the value of having a dedicated Salesforce integration user. You don't have to furiously take notes or take photos. You're certainly more than welcome to, but at the end, on the final slide, I have a link to a PDF that'll give you a copy of everything we're covering today. So without further ado, forward-looking statement. I'm sure everybody here is familiar with this by now. I do not work for Salesforce. You should not make any purchasing decisions based on what I say today. And you should only purchase shares in a publicly traded company based on existing features. So what are we going to cover today? So let's talk about who this session's for. This session is for admins and accidental admins who oversee Salesforce instances where there are third-party applications installed, which is probably most Salesforce instances. The goal of being here today, to learn more about what an integration user is and the benefits of deploying one in your instance. What do you need to understand now before you leave today? What are the costs of deploying a Salesforce integration user and how much upfront time is required to do that, which is also a cost? And how is this going to benefit you in the future? Well, in the long run, an integration user is going to make your life a lot easier as an admin, and it's also going to make your org a lot more secure. So, before I start, how many people here are admins in an org? Okay. And how many of you have third-party applications installed in that org? Okay. And how many of you have third-party applications installed in your org, and you are the user license that have authorized those applications? So they are under you. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So here we go. So Salesforce is the most powerful CRM in the world. Hopefully you've already drank that Kool-Aid or you wouldn't be here today. Part of that, and a significant part of that in my opinion, and I've been around for a while so I've got to see it grow, is it's the large and diverse ecosystem of third-party applications that we can integrate with Salesforce as part of what makes it so valuable. And organizations have long seen the value of extending the benefits they get from Salesforce and the return they get from Salesforce by integrating it with other applications that they use in their day-to-day business. So things like marketing automation platforms, data enrichment platforms like Clearbit, customer success platforms like Gainsight, and then financial platforms like your back-end accounting and financial systems. So for a long time, organizations have seen the value in that, and the number of integrations that we see in the instances we work in is growing significantly every year. And every one of those integrations is passing data in and out of your instance to Salesforce, and whether you know it or not, assuming they have a two-way integration, they also have the ability to see almost any data in Salesforce that you've given them visibility to. Especially if you are the authorizing user as an admin, they can pretty much see anything in your instance of Salesforce that they want. So with that set of challenges, how do we ensure these integrations are stable? How do we ensure they're auditable? And how do we ensure they are secure? One of the ways that we do this, and one of the most important ways that we do this for our clients, is we utilize an integration user. So let's talk about what an integration user is. An integration user is an admin's best friend. They are your best friend. They will save you a ton of time and frustration and 7 p.m. phone calls on Friday nights when stuff is going wrong. So it's a dedicated user with a full Salesforce license that has a custom profile, a custom permission set or sets, and they're used for any third-party integrations that you've got in your instance of Salesforce. So instead of that integration being logged in as you, the admin, you are logging that integration in, and it converses with Salesforce as this dedicated integration user. Great examples of what you would tie an integration user to. Marketing automation platforms is one of the most common ones. Marketing automation platforms are generally updating tens, hundreds of thousands of records in your instance of Salesforce every day. You don't want that tied to some regular human user's license. It probably changes, alters, and updates more data in your instance than any other application you're going to install. So it's a very high risk one. Customer support. Enrichment tools. Again, enrichment tools are great. Clearbit, one of my favorite products. But if you're integrating something in Salesforce that can overwrite your leads, your accounts, your contacts at a whim and might do them in batches of 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000, you probably don't want that running under a general user. So these are all examples of where you would want to use an integration user. So, how many people have been to the expo so far? Shopping, maybe for nice, pretty things we want to buy and take home to our org. When you talk to the people who deploy those, one of the things you usually ask is like, hey, how hard is this thing to deploy and install? And it's super easy, super easy. All you do is you take your admin login, you just log in, you deploy it, and you're good to go. That is, these people mean very well, but no integration should ever have full admin access to your instance of Salesforce. Never, ever, ever should they have that admin level access. So let's talk about why. So if a package is available in the App Exchange, it's gone through a very thorough security review. And I can attest to that because I've gone through that very thorough security review. But you may also have third-party applications that are not part of the App Exchange that you've authorized. They're outside the official Salesforce ecosystem. You may have custom APIs that have been built that are talking with third-party apps. In addition, even the third-party apps that are vetted by the App Exchange, Salesforce can ensure that they are a credible, solid app. But what Salesforce cannot ensure and guarantee is that they are not going to get hacked. And Salesforce cannot ensure and guarantee that at some point they won't have a bad actor inside their organization who tries to steal data. And so it's not about not trusting those integrations. It's about minimizing the amount of exposure and the amount of risk that you have. That's why this is important. So when you think about installing an integration and allowing it admin level access, which is basically what we call charmingly God level access at our office, you have to think about it. Would you ever, or do you want to ever let a third-party application create or deactivate your users, including you? Do you ever want a third-party application to be able to delete records? Should they be able to reset your users' passwords and lock users out? Should they be able to create new permission sets and assign them to different people, including a new user maybe they create? These are pretty high-risk scenarios that you probably don't want a third-party application being able to do. So let's talk about the benefits. The fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the FUD scare tactics are over. We'll talk about the auditing and reporting benefits. So as an admin, think about scenarios where you might have to deactivate a user. So if you have a user, the head of your marketing is the integration user. It's their user license that's tied to their marketing automation platform. And they've put in their notice, and they're actually going to work for a competitor. You want to freeze them right away, and you want to deactivate that user. If you do that, and they are the integration user for your marketing automation platform, all leads stop flowing into your instance of Salesforce, and no salespeople are getting leads until the 2 days it takes you to sort that all out and clean it up. Or if another user, head of sales, he's always been the integration user for your data enrichment platform, he hasn't done that well this quarter, and he didn't do very well last quarter, and now he doesn't work here anymore. Okay, we're locking him out of the system for obvious reasons. That means everything that's tied to his user as an integration has stopped working that day. And again, that means a 24-hour cycle while you scramble to fix everything. Very unpleasant. So another scenario is you as an admin, you upload or update 1,000 records in your instance of Salesforce, maybe 10,000 records. And immediately, within milliseconds, your marketing automation platform sees that, and because of the fields that you updated, your marketing automation platform also updates that record. And also, at the same time, your enrichment platform sees that new data, and your enrichment platform updates those records at the same time. So 3 different people, you, your marketing automation platform, and your data enrichment platform, have all updated 10,000 records within a couple of seconds of each other 3 times. Somebody comes back to you and says, there's a problem with this data. We've noticed that about 1,000 of these records have a data issue. You as the admin want to go in and you want to audit what went wrong. That's very difficult to do because if your marketing automation platform and your enrichment platform are also tied to your user license, you can't separate within the audit trail whether that was your action as a human being or whether that was the action of one of the 2 other platforms that's acting as you within Salesforce. So keeping those separate and keeping them on an integration user license makes finding those errors and troubleshooting those types of problems a lot easier. And finally, and this is one of our favorite ones, we spend a lot of time cleaning up clients' reports and dashboards, especially ones they make internally, because they don't screen out things that we know to screen out. So as an example, your marketing automation platform, maybe it generates 100,000 activities a day in your instance of Salesforce. And so your well-meaning salesperson wants to create a report and show how many activities they're creating a day, but that report doesn't make any sense because they're only creating about 100 activities a day, but the integration user acting as them for the marketing automation platform is creating an additional 1,000 activities a day in their name. And if they don't know how to easily screen that out, it can be really hard and complicated. One of the benefits of creating an integration user is in every report, you can go in and you can train your users, but also in all the reports you're creating and QAing, you can just go in and say, filter out anything created by profile integration user. And that way, even if you have multiple integration users, so you have one for your high-risk FP&A, so your accounting platform integration, maybe you have one for some kind of billing management or CPQ, you have one for marketing automation, just putting in exclude integration user profile in your reports cleans all that extra data out that's being created by non-humans, which makes reporting a lot easier. So we're going to talk about how to create an integration user. We're going to talk about creating a profile, creating your page layouts, and then your user creation, testing, and safe migration. So again, at the end, there's a link to a PDF that covers all of this. You don't have to scribble all these steps down, but also we're only here for 20 minutes, so I don't have time to cover each one of these steps. We'll be flipping through them, and I'll cover the highlights. First thing to know is the way that you do this is you start by cloning your standard user. Do not start by cloning your admin user. You want to start by cloning your standard user who doesn't have a lot of permissions and slowly giving them a little more access, as opposed to trying to clone your admin user and then they have way too much access, which defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do and trying to narrow it down. So definitely start by cloning your standard user. You don't want to give them any access to the setup area of Salesforce. You want to give them a password that never expires, and we'll talk about that. And they need the ability to modify all records that your integrations need to be able to work with, broad access to reports and dashboards, be able to post to Chatter. So let's talk about some of those things. So definitely you need API REST services checked in the setup and configuration. They want to be able to create reports and dashboards because most integrations now, the best of the best on the App Exchange, they come with their own sets of reports and dashboards, so you need to be able to do that as an integration. You want a password that never expires. And why we recommend that is we're not saying you should never change your password for your integrations. What we're saying is don't let somebody else determine, that being the machine, when that password is going to expire, because I can guarantee it's going to be when you're on vacation. And so what you want is a password that never expires and a reminder in your calendar and somebody else's calendar that says every 60 days, this is the morning that we block off to go update this password and then go update the password in each of the integrations that's tied to that user, but you don't want it to auto-expire. You probably need to give the ability to transfer records if you're using a product like Lean Data as an example that's routing your leads. View all data, modify all data, view all users. These are generally, you would need these for most objects, most of your standard objects like leads, accounts, contacts, cases, etc., because most of your integrations are really working within those. Things we don't want to enable. We probably don't want to let our robot and our third-party apps deploy change sets. We don't want them to be able to manage our IP addresses. We don't want them to manage package licenses. We don't want them to manage profiles and permission sets. Again, these are all things that we really want to keep tight to ourselves and not extend into a third-party application. Finally, in the general user permissions, if you're using a marketing automation product in particular, you're probably going to have to give the ability to convert leads. Marketing automation, again, create events and tasks, import leads, manage leads, run reports. These are the type of items we're talking about. You probably don't want to give the ability to view encrypted data, and you probably don't want to enable two-factor authentication. Because if you turn on that two-factor authentication and force it, that's going to start kicking some of your apps off once in a while, which is going to be a problem. So you've got your profile set up. That's great. Now you need to create your page layouts. So most of you probably have a page layout for each object that has almost every field on it that you use for your admin view. we recommend you clone that and you make that your integration user profile, page layouts for each of the standard objects they're going to access. And you might pull off a couple of fields that are sensitive so that they're not visible. But you do want to have most fields available, particularly any that any integration you're using is going to be talking to. And finally, we're going to create our user. So we recommend giving that user a profile image that shows they are a robot, and give them a name that shows they're a robot, and then give them a little description. So we usually say something like, I'm an automated system. I perform updates on records for you and sync data from third-party applications with your instance of Salesforce. Have questions? Email, and then your email goes in there. And the reason we do that is your end users are seeing tens of thousands of records a day being altered, records they own, leads they own, being updated by this mysterious thing. So make it really obvious what this thing is so that they understand what's going on. Don't hide that that's happening. So once we do that, we're going to test and deploy. Don't deploy everything to your integration user at once. So you push your integration user out, you do a bit of testing, take your least risky, least important integration and move that over to your integration user. Wait for 24 hours, check your audit logs, check your login history, make sure nothing's going wrong, and only then go grab your next one, push over the integration, wait another 24 hours, and keep doing this. And probably the last one that you want to move over is going to be data enrichment and marketing automation, because they update so many records that they're much more high risk than most of the other integrations. So why isn't everybody doing this? Because I'm doing a heck of a sales job, hopefully. So what's the downside? So biggest downside is upfront cost. In order for this to happen, you have to have a full Salesforce license that you allocate to this user. And for a lot of companies, they mentally struggle with that. And I understand that. I, for my own company, had to purchase a license for an integration user. But I've got to tell you that over time, what I've learned is that that $1,200 a year or whatever that amount is very, very small compared to the amount of time that we spend fixing stuff that breaks because we didn't do this. Or more importantly, if you're a sales organization, how many deals do you lose because no new leads come into your instance of Salesforce for 24 hours? Or how many leads do you lose, or how many cases get forgotten and customers get angry because cases stopped working for a day and a half and it was very difficult to fix and it happened on a weekend and nobody noticed? These are really big problems, and $1,200 is a very, very small amount of money. By the way, I don't know what all your Salesforce license costs are. I'm just picking a number, but it's a very small amount to pay annually in order to be able to do this. The other thing you have to consider, though, is there is upfront time to do this. You have to go through the steps that we talked about. Hopefully it's an easy primer and you're going to have a PDF to do it. But it is going to take you, half a day to build this out, depending on how many integrations you have. And then as you cut it over, it's probably going to take a week or two to cut over. So there is an investment of time. So your takeaway today, what do I want you to leave here with? So I understand the reluctance, maybe from a time perspective, maybe from a cost perspective, that might exist in terms of investing and creating an integration user. But we oversee a lot of orgs, and I can tell you the return on investment is there. Especially in today's GDPR world, that extra level of auditability, that extra level of reporting, that extra level of security that you get from this is worth significantly more than the cost of doing it. It's a huge return on investment. If you are going to be here for the next day or two, over here we have some other security items that you should go check out. If you're here, you're probably somewhat interested in security if you're watching me talk, so definitely go check those booths out. They're great. Finally, thank you. And this is the link you can get the presentation at. Do we want to do, I can do one or two questions if you yell, and then I can come down here for any other questions. Okay, you're going to have to yell though.
So would you prefer creating separate profile for each integration user?
That's a really good question. Okay, so I think the question is, would we recommend that you have a separate integration user license for each integration?
No, of course we'll have separate license, but when it comes to creating the profile, So you want to have, for example, Marketo profile
Yep.
and a lean data profile. So the way we have is, we have one highly restricted user, and we want to add all the permissions on the permission sets. So do you see any issues with that?
So that's a good question. So generally what we would recommend is mission critical integrations, if your organization has the budget and it's large enough, should get their own integration user. So Marketo is a really good example. We always advocate that something that alters as many records as Marketo would have its own integration user that's separated from everything else. And then especially financial stuff. So if you're integrating with Zora or if you're integrating with CPQ, we would usually advocate that that has its own integration user. And then most of the other stuff we would say you could pretty safely bundle under one user. In terms of how many profiles that you would have, we would recommend generally, and there's always exceptions, so don't like take this to the bank, but generally, the more extra profiles that you have, the tougher the maintenance, and that turns into a whole different set of issues. So our recommendation would be that you have one profile that's more restrictive, and then you're using permission sets to expand some of that access out to the different profiles. That won't always work. Some integrations are very picky, and there's special stuff that you have to do, and it may not work, but that's what we would advocate for, because you want to keep your maintenance minimal. I can do one more, and then I'll come down here. Okay. Very easy to see red shirt. Perfect.
How worthwhile do you think it is to get into like the very fine-grained details of exposing, say, just the right fields that a integration is going to need versus doing that kind of thing in broader strokes?
Yeah, so I think the question is, how far do you go in terms of checking every box is visible, not visible in every field and every object? And I mean, generally, barring you have a team of 5 admins and you are SOC 2 compliant and you have a lot of other stuff going on, it's probably not a realistic scenario. So generally, we would advocate that you're looking at it at a minimum by an object-by-object basis. So that's definitely very important. There's some objects that just integrations don't have to touch, so why even make it visible? But your general objects, certainly leads, contacts, accounts, etc., opportunities, you're probably going to have to open those up. Going field by field, generally we wouldn't advocate for that, but there are exceptions, and the exceptions generally tend to be custom fields that are there for something else. So as an example, if you deploy a CPQ or a product like Zora, you now have financial information often sitting on the account object. As an example, other applications don't need to see that, so we would usually advocate that those fields don't necessarily be available for the integration user. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna come down here, and if people have more questions, I will be available. Thank you.